You're on mute, Chairman.
I said we'll get started with the financial overview of where we are in the county. We've got a half hour. The first half of the meeting, PJ and Ron are going to give an overview, and then the second half, we're going to go into executive session so that we can get an update from Elena DeFeo-Keen, our labor attorney, regarding negotiations. So, PJ, do you want to get started?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First thing I want to say is I think it's important that everybody understands that the actions that we took in the 2020 budget were based on preserving cash. The report that I'm going to give you now is really to explain our cash position and where we ended up with in 2020. And I will make a disclaimer that both Ron's report and my report is totally unaudited. We're in the process of going through the 2020 audit right now. So this is unaudited and undoubtedly will change slightly, but overall, I think it's pretty accurate. Like I said, the reductions that we made to our 2020 budget were actually made to preserve cash because in my world, coming from a business background, and those of you on the Zoom here from a business background know that you need cash to pay bills, and cash is king. Those of you that are some of the newer supervisors, just to give you a little bit of perspective, I looked back at some of our old records, and in 2007, we actually had $15.4 million in cash on hand, and our fund balance was about $27.1 million. Fast forward to 2012 and 13, our cash balance was reduced to $5.6 million in 2012, and in 2013, it was further reduced to $4.5 million. Like I explained to the committee this morning, those were the years that PJ did not sleep and obviously contributed to the graying of the hair. So together with the chairman and Ron, we put together a plan. We knew that we needed to increase our cash balance on hand, and we did that through several different methods. Our accounts receivable at the time, taxes that were owed to us were over $15 million. So we reduced that over a period of a couple of years. We instituted the CBO and created some efficiencies within the departments themselves. So in 2018, we finally increased our cash balance basically to where we know it needs to be, and that is at least $10 million, if not $12 million. We need that amount of money on hand to pay our bills. So in 2018, the board adopted a fund balance policy that said that we have to maintain cash balances of 10 to 15% of the general fund budget appropriations, both restricted and unrestricted cash. So for the fiscal year 2020, that amount would equal to be about between $12 and $18 million that we should have on hand in cash. So as we went through the pandemic, something that none of us have ever experienced before, credit goes to the chairman for putting the committee on top of this and allowed us to slash expenses and do some projections as to where we thought we would be so that we did not run out of cash. So the end result is what you see there. Our cash balances in the general fund at the end of 2020, we had $13,345,000. Now, in 12/31/2019, we ended up with $10,724,000. The difference being, if we compared apples to apples, we chose, and I think most all of you knew, that we chose not to pay our pension payment on December 15th and take about a $50,000 deduction for early prepayment. Instead, we decided to hold on that cash to make sure we had enough to finish the year end. So if we really compared apples to apples, had we made that payment, we would have been down to about $7.6 million at the year end compared to 10.7 the year prior. That cash position would have put us in jeopardy from the New York State fiscal stress score. And also Moody's would take a hard look at that. As most of you know, Moody's sets our ratings for our bonds. And in the long run, we would have been hurt. The possibility in trying to secure future bonds that our rating could have been compromised and we'd have to pay more interest. So I think we made all the right decisions there. We ended in a palpable cash position at 13.3. And I think we made prudent decisions, and that was because of the expenses that were cut, including the furloughs and all the other expenses that were reduced in 2020. To the good news, our sales tax revenues were up $1.3 million, something that we totally did not expect, but was much appreciated, and I'm sure your towns appreciated that. But the negative impact, remember we're talking about cash here, is that the state receivables, as we've said all along, we anticipated the state receivables were going to be cut 20%. We did not anticipate the fact that the state was going to cut us about 100% in certain departments. So that DSS receivable alone was $6.5 million more than a year ago at the end of December. The taxes receivable increased by $500,000, our delinquencies. So the combination of just those two factors alone from a cash flow standpoint was a $7 million hit at the end, by the end of December. So our preservation of cash held up. We were able to hold on enough cash. We were able to pay all our bills. We were able to keep everybody employed. And I think we made some very prudent decisions in the 2020 budget. So as again, I'm talking strictly from a cash standpoint, and I'll turn that over to Ron now, who's going to talk about our unaudited 2020 financials.
Thanks, PJ. And before I present the financials for 2020, I just want to drop back a year ago, that April of 2020. At that time, our projections of lost revenues and cash flow were pretty significant. As you recall, NISAC, New York State Association of Counties, projected sales tax losses for county anywhere from a high of 9.3 million and 21.7%, or a low of almost $4 million and 9%. That alone was frightening. As PJ mentioned, state revenue minimum would drop 20%. Cut back on our programs, our services, CHIPS payments, grants, etc. And we approximated about $5 million of lost revenue right there, or cash. Reduction in property tax collection, as PJ mentioned, okay? And we did take a hit of $500,000. We're possibly looking at $1 million. Departmental revenues would decrease, particularly with interest income, looking down the line, and other department revenue across the board. At that time, a year ago, we were probably looking at almost a $15 million deficit in revenues. So again, the plan we put forth with the committee that the chairman put together was almost a six-pronged approach. First thing that we did was put together the 15-day furlough for all our employees. And we approximated that would save about $1.5 million. The chairman requested that all departments cut their 0.4s or the contractual expenses by about 20% or 20%. That would save the county approximately $2.3 million. We cut travel. We cut the summer youth program. We put a hard freeze on. We gave our employees not only the furlough, but the option to take the unemployment option to collect the federal stimulus. We also passed a resolution to use our $2.9 million tax stabilization fund if we had to go into it. And all that being said, we're still short millions of dollars to make up those revenue shortfalls. So I'll remind you that we passed the board a bond resolution to do a $15 million RAN if we were to need that. And those were the actions that we took place and we put in place last year. And as PJ said, it pretty much was the direction of the committee, all the supervisors on the committee, all you people, and the chairman that led us to where I'm going to show you where our financial position ended up at 2020. So I'm going to present. Everybody see the screen?
No, there's
No,
nothing
Ron.
showing.
There's nothing.
Nothing, huh? Let's try it again. Now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Again, I will emphasize, as PJ said, these are unaudited numbers. We feel confident, though, that they're pretty solid. And going into the audit, which is starting this month, we don't anticipate any big swings, but you never know. So that being said, they are unaudited. I'm just going to go through the revenue on the general fund. And we look at local sources, which is basically sales tax, mortgage tax, and tax levy. As PJ mentioned, our sales tax was actually up $2.7 million over budget, which was surprising in relationship to what NISAC was telling us back a year ago. We netted out about 1.8 million after the sales tax, 30% was paid back to the towns and the city of Hudson. Not surprisingly, as everybody can tell with real estate in Columbia County, our mortgage tax was up significantly, $840,000 over a $1.6 million budget. And again, a lot of your towns saw that in your mortgage tax checks that PJ would send out to you. So those two things combined pretty much kept our local sources above our budget. And also 2.2 better than last year's actual 2019. Departmental income, as we projected, would drop, and it did drop. It dropped 913,000. Majority of this was basically 526,000 in mental health, and the rest of it, the balance was basically DSS revenue programs that made up that. Intergovernment charges dropped by almost $250,000 as we projected. And a lot of that was because of interest income. As PJ mentioned, we had to use cash. Use cash, you're not gaining interest income on that. And our interest income was $162,000 below our budget. And along with that, our jail revenues were severely below budget too. We only took in $15,000 of jail revenue in last year. State aid and federal aid, particularly state aid, as we mentioned, and we knew this would happen, is that the state would cut back its 20%, and did they ever? And what you see here, the combination between the state and the federal, all of that is basically related to DSS, as PJ mentioned. So all about 2.3 million right here was related to DSS. Now jump into expenses. This is where our plan really took effect by cutting expenses. Okay, all our departments, okay, and all these classifications down the line here were below budget with the exception of benefits, and that had to do with our health insurance. But given the 15%, or excuse me, the 15-day furlough that everybody took, the 20% reduction in our budgets, and all those other things I mentioned up above, did take its impact, and we were able to reduce our budget by $6.2 million. So with that being said, our surplus in the general fund was 2.8 million. I remind you, these are again are not audited numbers, and this again is paper, okay, as of now, when we look at financial presentation here, or position. So $2.8 million surplus in the general fund. Other funds, where the same thing would happen with other funds, with the salaries and the contractual expenses. The road fund had a surplus of 1.3. Plus the road fund also, I'll throw in here, had a pretty mild winter, and that kind of helps out with salt and sand over time and so forth. So that also helped the picture here. And the surplus in the road fund was 1.3. Even those factors helped with the machinery fund, where we had a surplus of $278,000. Then solid waste had a minor surplus of only $26,000, but nevertheless a surplus. Right. Now, all funds combined, all right, when we look at salaries were $3.6 million below budget, which again is indicative of the 15-day furlough. Those employees that took advantage of the unemployment and so forth contribute to that. As a matter of fact, when we look at FTEs for 2020 versus 2019, we were 40 FTEs below 2019. We usually run about 864 FTEs, and in 2020 we had 824 FTEs. So it all flowed in that direction. You see how that worked. We're also below last year's, the 2019 actual salaries by 1.1 million for that. And I'll remind everybody in 2020, we did give the 2% increase to all our employees with the exception of sheriffs and corrections. And Elena will get into that later. Contractual expenses with all those cutbacks that we mentioned again, that we did, the 20% and so forth. We were $8.6 million below budget and $6.1 million below budget compared to 2019 for actual, not budget. And then budget, as I mentioned, with the benefits, they were over budget by 2.4, again, to health insurance, but in comparison to actual 2019, we're actually right on line for that. All that being said, and you add up all funds, okay, surpluses, unaudited right now, we're looking at a $4.5 million surplus going forward for that. Any questions?
Ron, on that last column where you had a difference, 7.5 million, were we that much higher last year?
No, that was over. That was the difference between 2019 to 2020.
So in 19 we had 7.5 million left over, and in 20 we had 4.5 million. So we were still less than the year before with the money left over.
No, I don't think we're looking at that part.
Okay.
But 7.2 was the difference between 20 and 19 actual, not the budget.
Okay.
Ron, it's Art Basson. Why did we budget a $2 million drop in benefits between 2019 and 2020? It seemed like a big drop.
That's the year we switched over to ASO, Art.
And then what happened to cause the $2 million overrun?
We had a severe case that exceeded $2 million. And I'm really not going to get into that unless we go into executive session, what happened, because that is personnel related.
Okay, so that was just an extraordinary medical expense that we incurred.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
PJ, are you ready?
Yep, Kelly. Okay, as if you hadn't had enough already, Kelly, we're looking for the next one. Okay, great, thank you. So remember what Ron just presented is paper financials, okay? How we look on paper. Moody's looks at that. Moody's gonna love it. The state fiscal stress score will love it as well. So, but remember that's what's on paper. So just a quick update as to where we are for the first quarter. And again, this is in cash, okay? We're actually, our general fund cash on hand is up $5.7 million. And the reason for that is The state opened their pocketbook in the month of March. They opened up the coffers and started to pay some of our receivables. They paid us actually $5.4 million in the month of March alone. The town tax collector payments increased during the month of March as well. This too will level off in April. You'll see in April there'll be less collections than there were in March. And on top of that, we're finding the release of the 15% holdback for some of the departments, in particular the health department and mental health as well, from New York State. Sales tax, you're going to love to hear this. As of this morning, we are up $1.1 million compared to a year ago. That's actually amounts to about 11% increase. That figure also includes the holdback that the state reached in and grabbed and took from us on February 4th of $266,000 for the hospitals that were in dire straits. Now, what I read this morning from NISAC is that the state took it from us on February 4th. However, they have not paid the hospitals yet. Surprise, surprise. So we do have concerns, though, moving forward, okay? I personally have concerns because remember the tax foreclosures, those with delinquent taxes. We have yet to foreclose on people that have not paid their taxes since 2016. So we are way behind in that. This has definitely a compounding effect that if we can't foreclose on those properties, get them back on the tax rolls, we keep charging them taxes and they continue not to pay. So it actually compounds itself. The taxes receivable increased $1.3 million when the towns turned their books back into us on the 1st of June. Last year, the receivable increased $1.3 million. And so we're unsure what the balance will be this June. The restoration of monies reduced in the original 2021 budget, and how much we're going to be able to use the stimulus funds to replenish them is still unknown. We're still waiting for guidance from the Treasury Department. And last but not least, the state accounts receivable at the end of March this year is up $2.5 million over a year ago. And just because they released all that money in March, we have no idea what's going to happen moving forward. Are they going to continue to release money? Or are they going to hold back? That's a complete unknown. Last but not least, you will have good news in the mortgage tax. The mortgage tax just ended the end of March, and my early figures show that it's up about $700,000 compared to a year ago for that time period. So that's it.
Thanks, PJ. Any questions?
Chairman, could I ask Ron, I guess, one more question regarding the same thing? So if around $4.5 million is what we had for budget overage, call it, I realize that budget isn't cash on hand, but we budgeted a certain amount. We cut back because of COVID. We had about 4.5. Can you compare that to what was left over after 2019? This is my first year at the end of a budget season. I don't know what the typical, typically we'll underestimate revenues slightly and overestimate expenses slightly. And I know on the town budget, we often have at least a little pool left over. So what is that typical amount in 19, for example?
Yeah, you're talking surplus. Budget surplus.
Budget
okay.
surplus.
Okay, and probably going back 7 years in audited financial statements, we've always had a surplus, Supervisor. Not a lot, not a big surplus, but we did a pretty good job at budgeting. I think last year our surplus was less than $1 million. Some year it comes in $4 million. But I will say this, going back since I've been here, this is the largest surplus that we've seen going forward. So, but again, it's because of all those actions we took place. And again, the impact of sales tax as projected didn't hit us as bad as we thought. So that contributed to this large surplus of the $4.4 million.
Awesome. Thank you. The town ended up in the same position. We're normally, 50,000 on our $2 million budget. This year we were 300. So I just wanted a comparison point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
your towns, you benefit from the sales tax. You guys benefit from the mortgage tax.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was all over your budgets.
All these, all these projections, which was all we had to go on. We cut way back on expenses and then it ended up different. So
Fortunately, what the towns don't have is the big receivable from the state. You guys don't have the state programs that we have. It's, social services and mental health and public health. Probably the only state revenues you experienced were CHIPS, and even those were refunded to almost 100%.
Yeah.
We struggle with that. As PJ mentioned, we still don't know going forward what's going to happen. We kind of think, PJ and I, since the state's on a fiscal year and their fiscal year ended March 31st, it's probably one of the reasons why they opened the coffers up to help their financial position and maybe looking better for stimulus. Who knows? But could be the reason why they let some of that money go up.
Okay. Okay, now I just want to thank you all. And I want to thank Ron and PJ for the presentation. As we've said this a lot of times, but the reason we're where we are is because of the action we took last year and the action we took in the budget. And I think I'd rather be in the position we're in now than the alternative, which is to be in a deficit situation. So I want to thank the budget review committee, or the budget review work group, I should say, as well as all the supervisors who helped facilitate, these reductions and these plans that we implemented. With that, I want to entertain a motion to go into an executive session so that we can talk about negotiations.
I'll move it. Collins.
Donnell, motion, second.
Second.
Jim Guzzi, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, so we'll just wait and once
Yep.
Sean is ready. Okay, so now you need to end this meeting, Matt.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn the executive the finance committee meeting, I'm sorry.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Do you need me
all
to
right.
stay on for the Board of Supervisors meeting now?
I'm sorry?
Do you need
You
me to
need
stay on?
Elena
Do
for
you
the
need-
Board of Supervisors.
No, you don't need to stay.
Okay, very good. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank
Good
you.
night, Elena.
Good
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Can I invite Danielle back in?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and it wasn't a finance committee meeting, it was a financial overview meeting, so
Yes.
just to clarify.
Okay,
Okay,
so we're still live.
so I want to call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. And we'll take a moment for silent prayer, followed by the salute to the flag. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
liberty
for
and
all.
justice for all.
Justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to request the clerk call the roll.
Basson,
Here.
Weigelt. Leader,
Here.
Benvenuto,
Here.
Stats,
Here.
Adams, Metler,
Here.
Collins,
Here.
Riley,
Present, Madam Clerk.
Eldridge,
I'm here.
Fury,
Here.
Kirsten,
Here.
Livonia,
Here.
Sterling,
Here.
Mia,
Here.
Shamitas,
Here.
Mussman,
Here.
Scalera,
Here.
Guzzi,
Here.
Hoatling.
Sorry, here.
Okay, Morel,
Here,
Not,
Here.
Skoda.
Present.
So 3106 present, 429 absent. We have a quorum.
thank you. I need a motion to pay the bills, accept the treasurer's report, and file the minutes within the clerk's office.
So moved.
Second motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have a proclamation. I'm going to ask Rob Lagonia to read the proclamation for National Public Safety Telecommunications Week.
County of Columbia Chairman's Proclamation. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property, and whereas the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Columbia County 911 Emergency Communications Center, and whereas public safety communicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, as well as the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, ensuring the safety, and whereas public safety communicators of the Columbia County 911 Emergency Communications Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas the Columbia County 911 Emergency Communications Department and each Columbia 911 dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the past year, particularly in their role on the front line of Columbia County's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and public health emergency. And whereas the Columbia County 911 Emergency Communications Department and each Columbia 911 dispatcher continues to exceed state performance standards and training standards year after year, and often act as a regional leader to other public safety answering points in areas of technology, service standards, policy development, and system management. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Columbia County Board of Supervisors declares the week of April 11th through April 17th, 2021, to be National Public Safety Communicators Week in Columbia County in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our county and citizens safe. Given under my hand and privy seal of the County of Columbia at the Supervisors' Chambers in Hudson, New York, this 14th day of March in the year of our Lord, 2021, Matt B. Morrell, Chairman, Columbia Board of Supervisors.
It's actually April, sorry. I have to change that date, Rob.
Okay. Given under
Sorry
my
about that.
privy and seal in Columbia County Supervisors Chamber in Hudson, New York, and this 14th day of April in the year of our Lord, 2021. Matt B.
Thank you.
Morrell, Chairman, Columbia Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a guest with us tonight, Danielle Hoteling with Twin County Substance Abuse Services, who's going to give us an update. Danielle, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm just going to turn my camera on just for a moment so you guys can put a face with the name. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Hoteling. I know many of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite, and I'm delighted to present for you tonight. So I am going to turn my camera off, though, so that I can share my presentation. So just give me a moment. Can everybody see a presentation?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Danielle Hoteling. I'm the Special Projects Coordinator for Twin County Recovery Services, and that means a lot of different things, which I'll go over. So many of you know me from my previous role as working as the Addiction Recovery Coordinator. In 2018, the County Board of Supervisors, as well as the Greene County Legislature, did a pilot project as a result of the opioid epidemic response plan that Columbia County created. And I was the the coordinator for that. Due to funding issues and some other issues, to no fault of either county, that role was not continued. Many of the duties, though, that I was in that role carried over to the Special Projects Coordinator role. So still overseeing largely the operations of our addiction coalition and a lot of the opioid epidemic work that goes on in both Columbia and Greene County. In addition to that, I've taken on what is a few different grants. So the Rural Responses to the Opioid Epidemic Grant, that's kind of a mouthful. That is granted by the Bureau of Justice Administration. And that's a partnership with Ellenville Regional Hospital. So that grant actually covers Columbia, Greene, and Ulster County. I'm your representative for Columbia and Greene. And then I have a counterpart in Ulster County. And one of the things we're doing with that is developing a high-risk mitigation team, which is something I have a slide on further in the presentation. I'm also responsible for the Rural Communities Opioid Response Program grant, which really, in a nutshell, it has a lot to do with the naloxone trainings that occur in the counties, the response, and a lot of data reporting on behalf of Twin County Recovery Services on our clients and our medication-assisted treatment program. And then for those of you that are familiar, I'm also the community engagement facilitator for the Healing Communities Study. So I'm a person of many hats, and I'm happy to have all of those roles in the county. So I'm just going to do a brief data review. Largely, a lot of the overdose data that we have right now, we're getting out of the ODMAP application. So those of you that are not familiar, that is the Overdose Detection Mapping Application Program. And it's a tool really designed to capture real-time suspected overdose spikes. And I do just want to be careful with that because, again, these are reported by law enforcement and first responders. So the data that I'm going to present in that portion is in no way representative of every overdose. There are some that still may be pending toxicology, again, because there's a lack in the New York State Department of Health database. And also it doesn't consider overdoses that may have been reversed in the community where 911 or other law enforcement personnel were not present. So I just want to make sure I frame that correctly when I'm presenting the data, in that this is the best picture that we have, but I wouldn't say that it's in any way representative of the entire picture. So I just want to be clear about that. So this platform was developed by HIDA, and we use it to discover spikes and develop response plans, so we can kind of look at the map and see where overdoses are happening. So if we see that there's an increase in a particular township or zone in the county, our Greener Pathways program and other service providers can deploy resources to those areas to provide naloxone trainings, bring our peers there and promote linkages to services if that's warranted. So this is for the last year. Again, we're in the middle of April. So I just did from April of last year till March of this year. Again, typically a lot of our mapping, you'll see, goes kind of on a bell curve. So this is pretty consistent. I would say this is pretty normal. Again, some of these may be alarming to some of you, maybe some of you not so much. But again, I'll get more into kind of the data as we go along. So far this year, there have been 33, again, suspected overdoses thus far in 2021. 29 were non-fatal and 4 of them being fatal. Again, there are a few that are pending toxicology. And again, there is opportunity for there to be some that we may not be aware of. For the same time period in 2020, the total was 20, 18 of being non-fatal and 2 being fatal. So there has been an increase for this January 1 period to April 14th, because I didn't run this data today just to make sure I was on point for this presentation. And those are the totals, how it compares to last year. And then I just wanted to give you kind of a scope of 2020 versus 2019, so you kind of have some tracking along that. So for 2020, we had 75 overdoses, 8 of them being fatal and 67 of them being non-fatal. And for 2019, 52, 46 being non-fatal and 6 being fatal. So here's some points of information. Again, I talked about kind of the data piece of it, but anecdotally, I can say some things, because again, I'm not an expert in any way in kind of this piece of it, but something we are seeing is a rise in fentanyl contaminated drug supply. And when I say that, I don't mean just heroin. Something we've been seeing, especially I'll say within the past 6 months or so, is an increase in fentanyl contaminated stimulants, methamphetamine and cocaine, but locally more primarily cocaine. And again, this is, I attend a lot of calls with State Department of Health and with other counties, and this is not something unique to our county. This is something they're seeing statewide. What we're doing locally, though, is putting out a lot of PR about it on our Facebook pages to let people know that this is a problem, because I think this goes into my next point. I think we're dealing with kind of a different demographic than we were maybe a few years ago. A few years ago, we were seeing the majority of the overdoses were, daily opioid users that maybe didn't know that there was fentanyl contamination in their heroin, or even some pressed medication pills, manufactured pills. But now we're seeing a different demographic of recreational users, and this pertains primarily to the cocaine users, who maybe they aren't daily users. They use a few times a year, recreationally with family and friends, whatever. So again, I don't want to promote drug use of any sort, but really, I just wanted to bring home the point that we're dealing with kind of 2 different populations here. One being your kind of traditional daily drug users, daily opioid users, and then also kind of some of your more recreational drug users. So this also requires a different approach when we're talking about how we're following up as peers. Our peers are following up with these individuals, because there are times where, and again, don't get me wrong, it's client reported. So there are times where the person says, I actually haven't used drugs in a few years, and it was just this party and I used a little bit and I overdosed. And that's something that we're seeing more and more. So we're also using some different messaging, again, on our Facebook pages and on other social media to kind of combat some of the stigma around drug use for that population. So naloxone trainings, the biggest way that we're combating overdoses and particularly the fatalities is doing naloxone trainings throughout the community. There are several certified opioid overdoses prevention programs in Columbia County. Twin County Recovery Services just became one in 2021, which we're really proud of. Prior to that, our Greener Pathways peers were all trained to administer naloxone, but also to train peers that we were working, people that we were working with. But that was largely through our partnership with Department of Health. So there are more mechanisms for someone to access naloxone, which is great. And our naloxone numbers for just this first quarter of 2021 is 138 total just within Columbia County. How does that compare to 2020 and 2019? I put that on the screen. The one thing I think when you look at these numbers that you'll notice is quarter 3, there were only 2. That's largely because a lot of our naloxone trainings are groups. So sometimes it's, Twin Counties groups that it's clients, or, maybe there are other community-based resources, CCPR, different community groups that we work with that we provide naloxone trainings for. And for whatever reason, the data is a little skewed because quarter 3 of 2019, we did not have any community trainings. And again, I don't really have an explanation for why that was at the time, but that's why that number is so low. But generally, we do quite a bit of naloxone training in the community. And at any point, you can text 21,000, like Narcan kit to 21,000, and that will bring you to a form, and Greener Pathways will, if you fill out the form, it'll go to Greener Pathways and they will meet anyone, anywhere, whether it's, a coffee shop or their office, where they will train them in naloxone and provide them with a kit. So I'm going to move on to kind of the grant stuff. So the high risk mitigation team is something I mentioned earlier. It's something that were recently developed. So that I already mentioned is a collaboration with Ellenville Regional Hospital. And I have oversight of that program. And we have 2 peers that respond to overdoses in the community. And we're working very closely with law enforcement. I've worked a lot with Supervisor Hoteling and Carl Quinn, our program director, Dan Almasi, and of course our sheriff and several of the sheriff's deputies that are a part of that. And they've recently launched the referral program that we'll talk about a little bit later. And we will be utilizing the NET system to follow the individual throughout their entire recovery journey. And I think that's what's really different about this program and this approach, is that there's collaboration, right? We're really meeting with the person after an overdosing and triaging, what are your needs and what are you willing to do for your recovery today? I think a lot of times when we think of follow-up, they're thinking, we're going to get them an outpatient appointment at Twin Counties. If that is what they want, then sure, we will absolutely do that. If they want detox or rehab, then that's what we do. Sometimes they need mental health treatment. They need other services before they're really willing to engage and commit to a life of abstinence, right? Because that's kind of a tall order if you really think about it. You've been, drinking or using substances for a portion of your life, and now we're asking you to completely give that up and no turning back. So it is definitely a recovery journey, and we really promote whatever they want to do for their recovery today and anything that promotes overall wellness. So that's just kind of a little bit different than your traditional abstinence-based approach, while we hope that the goal for the individual is ultimately abstinence and freedom from their addiction. So just other updates to mention. I did talk a little bit about the referral program. Greener Pathways has actually received 19 referrals through this program so far, and that's just for SUD. I don't have a number from Dan Almasi, but I know he's gotten significant referrals too for mental health. The sheriff's office has done a great job, and I give them a lot of props for the work that they're doing. Something else noteworthy that I wanted to mention is that we recently met with CMH, and over the last year, COVID has put a lot of stress on our system, and a lot of services were not happening the way they traditionally would. Again, we were getting calls from CMH on occasion to screen over the phone and connect to services. But we just got approval to start meeting in person again. The majority of our staff are vaccinated and have had both vaccines, so that definitely helped. And something else we're looking at is the patients will now be provided SUD resources automatically upon discharge. So if you think about when you go to the emergency room and they give you a printout of your diagnosis and what does it mean and resources, there will automatically be information in there. And there's a set list of kind of disorders if they come in for obviously an overdose or maybe an abscess or some other SUD related issue that'll automatically print out for them. And so it wouldn't be on a case manager or a doctor or someone to have the conversation. It really gives it to them. And in the event that they do want to peer, we can connect them directly with that. So we're really excited about that. And then I just wanted to mention, because I talked about the Columbia Green Addiction Coalition, we were meeting quarterly. And I think with COVID, there was really a big push to say kind of, what are we doing? Is it working? And restructuring the Addiction Coalition. So our group decided to start meeting bi-monthly in order to kind of build up more steam after, I want to say after COVID. I wouldn't say that we're after COVID, but really kind of coming out of that and really recharging and refueling and trying to get back into the swing of things as a group. Because I think with COVID, a lot of organizations were very survival mode, rightfully so, really focused on their own programs, their own clients, their own staff, and how to keep everyone safe. And now we're really getting back into pushing more and more of the collaborative efforts that we were doing before. So I think, I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I will leave this up. You can feel free to always, reach out to me by phone or by email. I can always pull data, if you want, if you just give me a call and say, hey, do you have the most recent overdose numbers or Naloxone training, or what are you guys doing? I'm more than willing to give those updates at any time. So I think that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions for Danielle?
Danielle, it's Art Basson. I was wondering, do you guys have any concerns about this new marijuana law and how that might affect the entire drug use culture in the county?
So that is something that's currently being discussed amongst all the providers, because I think, for a treatment center, I think we treat it similarly to the way that we treat alcohol, right? So, if you're in an abstinence-based program, you're on probation or parole or treatment court, whatever mandates you have, there's an expectation that you also won't be using alcohol, that you won't use NyQuil that has alcohol in it, and some of those kind of criteria for traditional treatment programs. So I think that will be the same. But what I'm thinking is, we're coming into an age of we're seeing a lot of, especially people who are coming off of opioids, who are saying, well, I use it as a medication. And it's like, well, if they do have a card indicating that they can use that as a medication, as far as regulation, I think there's going to be, OASIS is going to give some guidance on this, I'm sure, but really it would be treated just like if they were on a anti-anxiety medication, that could be a benzodiazepine that traditionally would come up with a positive tox screen, but if they're prescribed it, that's a different story. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of discussion around it, but it's not something that's concerning at the moment. I think it's really going to be treated very similarly to alcohol.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Holding has her hand up.
Chairman, I just wanted to thank Danielle for all of your hard work. She mentioned that myself and Dan Almasi and Carl Quinn and Danielle and the sheriff and Captain Bray have been meeting on a regular basis. And just to give a heads up, at the next public safety meeting, Sheriff Bartlett will be coming forward with a resolution asking for approval to enter into an MOU to utilize some of this grant money that Danielle's talking about, so that the referral program that's already in place can actually also link into this net tracking program that she's talking about. And it's going to provide a little more of that peer support as opposed to just a simple referral, somebody that will really follow up. Only for people who want it. It's going to be, voluntarily, people will need to sign on to that they want to do it. So just to give public safety and the full board kind of a heads up that this presentation is laying out a program that we're hoping to utilize through the sheriff's office in coordination with mental health and Greener Pathways and Twin Counties. So if anyone has any questions about any of that, Danielle can certainly come to the public safety meeting as well to answer questions. But Just wanted to give that heads up.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor.
Danielle, it's Patsy. It's good to see you again, even if it's
You
like
too.
this.
Thank you.
I want to, first of all, I know how it is. I've worked with you before quite a bit and everybody else. So when can we start doing some of the Narcan training? People have asked me in town, and I know you really can't, and I made the town hall available for emergency Narcan training. I know for a fact that we've had quite a bit. I work with Carl Quinn and drug addiction and so forth, but we had a lot of overdoses and so forth. And awareness meetings, maybe we can start again, start answering questions for the people in the community and so forth. How we used to do it, you remember, Danielle? And
Forums and yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so as soon as we can start doing that, you should reach out to the supervisors to make sure that they can make their place available. I mean, I used to flood the courtrooms and so forth, and I'm still very involved and people still come to me and so forth. But I think we need to get a little bit more awareness, especially with this COVID. People have been locked in. They don't have any idea how bad it's gotten out there in the community, unless us as supervisors let them know that it's not always just staying home and making sure we're just locked down. So more programs are needed and so forth. So, keep in touch and I'll be glad to help you with opening it up or whatever we can do.
Absolutely. We would be more than willing to come to any town to do naloxone trainings or any public information. Any meeting that you want us to attend where we can provide an informational session or presentation, we'd be more than willing to do that. Absolutely.
I will say at one point, the whole Board of Supervisors were trained in Narcan, how to use Narcan. So that's, we were obviously, we need to be retrained, and a lot of us, aren't on the board anymore, but it was a valuable training. I think I just threw away my Narcan packet because it was outdated.
We can absolutely set that up if that's something that the full board would like.
Yeah, once we were able to meet in person again, maybe we should do that.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Chimades has his hand up.
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Danielle, thanks for the presentation. The last time you presented to the full board, maybe it was a couple years ago, you had, I know you were in a different role at that time, you presented sort of like a bunch of, some of it was policy oriented things. It was sort of like, here are the next steps, the next barriers that we sort of have countywide to deal with this. Do you still sort of have like a progress report of like, we've completed these items from that list and these are the next new items that we should be focusing on?
I would say generally, yes, I have some of that stuff that I could look back at the previous presentation. Also, a lot of I know something we were working on prior to my transition coming from the ARC role into this one was we were trying to work on a combined addiction epidemic response plan that would encompass both Columbia and Greene County goals. That's something I think was put on hold. I know I worked closely with Melissa Sheriff on a lot of that stuff. That's something we could revisit. But yeah, I would absolutely I could look through that and get you some more information.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful to have that kind of roadmap, policy roadmap for the board.
Mm-hmm. And actually, we have adopted back in, I believe, 16 or 17, we adopted an opioid plan for the county, Columbia County.
Yes. And that one of the deliverables of that plan was the hiring of the ARC, the pilot position. And also, I believe the OD MAP spike response plan that myself, Carl Quinn, Department of Health worked on and we're actively utilizing in the event that there are over a few overdoses with, and again, it's a tiered response. So in the event that there are multiple overdoses within a 24-hour period, we deploy resources, we do naloxone trainings and things like that. That's something that the county also adopted. So, any other questions?
Donnell, Supervisor Collins.
Hello, Danielle. You mentioned a shift from habitual to recreational overdoses, I believe. Has there been a shift also in age demographics? Is this going into the younger school systems, like school-age children this year? given some of the emotional struggles with the change in the COVID lockdown, or is it holding as it is?
I haven't heard about a lot of the increase in use in like the adolescent population. I have heard that there's been an increase in hospitalizations for mental health around that population. Again, that would be kind of either Mobile Crisis or Dan Almasi would kind of have a better idea of that. So I don't know that the demographics have necessarily changed. Again, I'm just really basing it off of our clinic and our programs. I could inquire with some other programs to see if that's something that they're seeing.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? Danielle, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'll log off for you guys, but feel free really to reach out anytime, any information you need. If I don't have it, I'll get it for you. So I appreciate your time and thank you all.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, Kelly, I'm going to ask you to read the resolutions.
Okay, resolutions 93 of 2021 to 105 of 2021 by Supervisor Ligonia.
Mr. Chairman, I present these resolutions for adoption.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I fell asleep at the switch there for a second.
Yeah. Resolution 106 through 112 by Supervisor Benvenuto.
Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second?
Second the motion.
All right, second, Supervisor Bury. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 113 through 117 by Supervisor Scalera.
Supervisor
Mr. Chairman,
Scalera.
I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying, introducing you.
Oh. Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 118 through 125 by Supervisor Knott.
Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
That's it, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Do any supervisors have any other business to bring before the board?
I do. Town of Chatham would like to thank Chairman Morrell and Kelly for composing a letter of support for our grant application. Again, I'm very grateful, Chairman and Kelly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering what the next steps are with the Granicus proposal that we got at the special board meeting a couple of weeks ago.
We need to schedule another full board meeting. We had adjourned asking if supervisors had any questions, similar to what we did with the solar, so that we can bring the questions back to Granicus and hopefully get some answers, and where it'll answer all your questions. So we need to schedule that, Supervisor Basson.
This is Ron. I emailed you back. The state did not pass the sales tax.
No?
Yeah, I saw that, Ron. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Ron. But so we probably within a week or so, we'll schedule another meeting. We'll pick a date and then we'll have, hopefully everybody's kept track of the questions they want to ask Granicus.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Any other supervisors? Supervisor Holding, I see your hand up.
I'm just eagerly awaiting the implementation committee. I know you said you were.
I'm saving the best for last.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure we weren't gonna have to wait another month.
I will warn you that it's going to be lean and mean.
Okay.
Supervisor Chimitas?
Yeah. For those celebrating Ramadan, I just wanted to wish everyone a Ramadan Mubarak for both on the board and the community.
Thank you, Supervisor Chimitas. Supervisor Deuce, do you have your hand up? Maya?
Yeah, thank you. We are the fasting month, whole month. Just we pray for us, Our whole community is, in praying month. So that's it. Thank you for mentioning, Mr. Chavani. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other supervisors? Okay. We'll move on. I'm going to make an appointment to the Police Reform Implementation Committee. And I'm going to appoint Supervisor Bury and Supervisor Holding, and I'm going to ask them to co-chair the committee. Also appointing from the community, William Hughes, Dave Hall, and Gary Graziano. And then also Sheriff Bartlett. Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I want to thank you, Chairman, for appointing me to the implementation committee and allowing Supervisor Bury and I to serve as co-chairs. I'm excited for that opportunity. Thank you.
And as I said previously, the Citizen Review Committee, I'm still working on that. I'm waiting to hear back from a few people. And we'll release, as soon as I get that done, we'll release it to the board.
Great, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion from Mike Benvenuto?
Second, Solera.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.